I was staring at the last 10 cents in my bank account when I saw the listing. We're seeking a mature woman for social accompaniment with our daughter. Excellent compensation plus brand new car. My first thought was that it was a scam. My second thought was, who cares? I had exactly 53 days before the bank would physically remove me from my mother's house, and the eviction notice had been taped to her kitchen door in official red letters. So I spent 20 minutes reading comments from people calling the couple who posted this ad absolutely humiliating, saying no one with self-respect should subject themselves to this. I laughed out loud in the internet cafe. Dignity is a luxury only people with other options can afford, and I was officially out of options. I responded to the listing the same day. The interview was strange. They studied me like someone inspecting a used car for hidden damage. They asked detailed questions about my past relationships, how I handled responsibility, whether I was discreet, and what I thought about commitment. The woman, an architect with perfectly straight hair and a $2,000 outfit that probably cost more than my rent, explained very clearly while her husband nodded. Our daughter is introverted. She's going to college in 3 months and has never had a girlfriend. We want someone to help her open up. Socially. She needs to experience life before she leaves for university. I understood immediately what they were really asking. They wanted me to pretend to date their daughter for 3 months. They wanted someone to play act a relationship so convincing that their sheltered child would learn to be more social, more confident, more alive. I didn't say no. I didn't even hesitate. I signed a 9-page contract in their downtown office, sitting across from a desk made of expensive wood. New car when the contract ended. $5,000 a month. A non-disclosure agreement with teeth. A clause stating I couldn't speak about their daughter to anyone, ever, or they'd sue me into oblivion. Everything was very professional, very clean, very cold, very strange. But I was a woman who would be homeless in 2 months, who had already borrowed money from her mother that I could never repay. So I signed everything they put in front of me without reading most of it. My name is Maddie. I was 34 years old and had absolutely no dignity left to lose. I'd been waitressing, bartending, doing gig work, anything that paid cash and didn't require a background check. I'd been sleeping on my mother's couch and pretending it was temporary, even though we both knew it wasn't. I'd been invisible for so long that taking this job felt like the first real choice I'd made in years. What I didn't expect was walking into Quinn Chen's apartment and discovering I had absolutely everything to lose. Because Quinn wasn't shy. Quinn was imprisoned. She was a beautiful cage built by people who thought they were protecting her. And I didn't know it yet. Not really. But she would be the reason I stayed when the money ran out. She would be the reason I'd choose wrong and expensive and real. Before I start, I want to tell you something. If you love this kind of story, where 2 people find each other in unexpected ways, subscribe, comment below, and tell me. What would you do if someone offered you money to pretend? That was the first thing I didn't understand about Quinn. She was waiting for me to answer my own question, like she already knew something I didn't, like she'd been that person. The one who takes the deal, the one who pretends, the one who discovers the line between acting and living is much thinner than anyone tells you it is. I didn't know that Quinn had been waiting her whole life for someone to show her that line. I didn't know she'd been living on one side of it so long she'd forgotten the other side existed. I didn't know that walking into her apartment would mean walking into a cage so carefully constructed that the doors didn't look like doors anymore. They looked like choices. But I was about to find out. And nothing. Not the contract. Not the $5,000 a month. Not the promise of a brand new car. Would prepare me for what came next. Nothing would prepare me for her. Quinn opened the door to her apartment on a Saturday at 10 in the morning. She was dressed in a way that no one dresses to be home alone on a weekend. Gray wool pants with a perfect crease, an impeccable white blouse that looked ironed. Her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail so tight it must have hurt. Like someone who woke up and spent 2 careful hours perfecting microscopic details of appearance before anyone could see her. Before she could see herself being imperfect. "You're Maddie?" she asked with a voice that sounded like it was reading from a manual on etiquette. Very articulate, very controlled, every syllable precisely placed. "I am. You're Quinn?" "Yes." She didn't smile. She didn't extend her hand. She just stood in the doorway like she was waiting for me to disappoint her. And I wondered how many times that had happened already. There was a strange silence between us. She looked at me like someone trying to decode a language they'd only read about. I looked at her trying to understand how a 26-year-old woman could be so crystallized, so perfectly constructed, so without a single thing out of place or wrong. "Want to come in?" she asked, stepping aside with the kind of precision that suggested she'd practiced this entrance 100 times. The apartment was exactly how her parents had described it. Too modern, too clean, without a single thing genuinely out of place. Not a book lying open on the coffee table, not a mug abandoned on a nightstand, not a personal photo that wasn't professionally shot and perfectly framed. It was like being inside a furniture showroom or a museum exhibit labeled, "How to Live." Quinn walked in front of me with her back so straight it seemed structural, like she'd replaced her spine with a rigid rod. She opened the refrigerator without ceremony, and there it was, hanging on the stainless steel, a magnetic planning board. Days of the week marked in careful handwriting with color-coded activities. Mon. Gym. 6:30 a.m. plus. Work. 9:18h plus. Yoga. 7 p.m. Twos. Identical. Wed. Thu. Fry. Exactly the same routine repeated. Weekends had something labeled scheduled leisure, which apparently meant museum or brunch with pre-approved friends. Things vetted and safe and unlikely to produce scandal. "Did you plan your entire life?" I asked, looking at the board with something between pity and horror. "My parents like organization," she answered, like someone reading from a script she'd memorized long ago. And I understood in that moment that this contract wasn't about helping Quinn socialize or become more confident or find herself. It was about helping Quinn breathe. It was about helping her understand that oxygen didn't have to be rationed. And she'd never taken a deep breath in her entire life. I thought about the contract in my pocket. I thought about the money. I thought about how easy it would be to do this job and leave. Then I looked at Quinn, at how her eyes were already sliding back toward that controlled emptiness, that rehearsed smile, that practiced version of herself. And I decided something right then. I was going to burn this all down, not because she asked me to, but because nobody should live like a spreadsheet. Nobody should schedule their own freedom. I borrowed a motorcycle from a friend named Marcus who worked nights and wouldn't miss it. An old black Triumph, loud enough to be heard 3 blocks away, with worn leather seats and an exhaust that sounded like an airplane engine dying. Absolutely nothing about it was safe or appropriate or anything her parents would approve of. It was perfect in every way that mattered. Quinn appeared at the door of her building on Sunday afternoon and almost had a heart attack. "You're joking," she said, looking at the motorcycle like it was a living thing that might bite her. "I'm as serious as a heart attack," I replied, handing her a helmet that smelled like leather and possibility. "Maddie, I've never been on a motorcycle," she said, her voice smaller than it had been in the apartment, more real. "Exactly. That's the whole point." She looked at the machine like it was a snake. Then she looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, yes. But underneath that, curiosity, hunger. "My parents will be furious if they find out," she whispered. "Your parents won't know. And if they do, too bad. You're 26 years old, Quinn. You're allowed to do things that scare you." That sentence seemed to hit something deep inside her, something that had been waiting for permission. She went quiet for 5 full seconds. Then she went back inside her building, came back with a borrowed jacket from a neighbor, and sat on the back of the bike like she was going to a firing squad. She gripped my waist so tight I could barely breathe, and I thought, this is how it starts. With fear. With holding on. I drove slowly at first, carefully. We crossed the city in the morning light. No rush. No pre-planned routes mapped out in advance. Just moving. Just existing in the moment without a schedule telling us where to be. And after about 20 minutes, when Quinn's grip on my waist loosened, when she finally breathed, when she finally let her shoulders relax from around her ears, I accelerated. Not too much. Just enough for her to feel the adrenaline spike through her body. Just enough for her to feel her body respond to something that wasn't programmed into a calendar. Just enough for her to realize that fear and freedom aren't the same thing, but they feel very close when you're accelerating on an unfamiliar motorcycle with a woman you barely know through a city you've lived in your whole life, but never really seen. We stopped at a lookout that overlooked the whole city, that place tourists go to take photos, then rush to the next Instagram spot. Quinn got off the motorcycle shaking. Not from cold, from everything. From the wind and the speed and the realization that she'd just done something unplanned. "You okay?" I asked, taking off my helmet and letting the morning air hit my face. "Yeah," she breathed, her voice shaky but real. "Yeah, I don't know. Different?" And we stood there watching the city spread out below us while she slowly came back to normal. Her eyes gradually relaxed. Her smile gradually became genuine, not performed. And I thought about how this was where it started. Not with grand gestures or perfect moments, but with someone simply choosing to shake, choosing to feel, choosing to be alive. Then came the rain without an umbrella. We were shopping in a neighborhood on the east side that Quinn had never been to, the kind of place her parents probably had warnings about, and it started raining like the sky was literally collapsing. Not a gentle rain. A deluge. Quinn immediately started looking around with panic, searching for a store entrance or a restaurant or anywhere to shelter from the weather. She was already mentally mapping the best place to wait it out. I grabbed her hand and pulled her into the street instead. "Maddie, are you insane?" she asked, trying to pull back, but I was already laughing. "Probably," I admitted. She protested for a few seconds, her entire body tense with the wrongness of it. Then she stopped resisting. Let her arm drop. Let the rain soak her carefully applied makeup in dark streaks. Let her perfect hair turn into a wet mess that dripped down her neck. And she started laughing. The kind of laugh you can't stop, that comes from a place so deep that no one had given permission to feel it before. Then came the chaos side of the night. We went to a neighborhood market, the kind of place that Quinn's parents had probably never stepped foot in, and bought everything that was junk. Cheap chocolate wrapped in plastic, snacks that tasted like colored plastic itself, generic brand soda that probably shouldn't exist. She looked at everything with the scared, excited eyes of someone who'd grown up eating organic poke bowls and kale salads. "Do you eat this?" She asked about a chocolate bar that cost 50 cents, holding it like it might explode. "Of course I do. Sometimes garbage is more honest than the expensive stuff. Sometimes cheap chocolate tastes better because nobody's pretending it's anything but what it is," I told her, and she smiled at that. Actually smiled, not performed, not calculated. We went back to her apartment at 3 a.m. with plastic bags rustling and Quinn laughing like she'd been drinking. But she'd only had terrible watermelon juice from the market. We sat on her perfect couch eating that junk, while Quinn told me stories about things her parents had prohibited over the years. My mom once saw me eating cheese that wasn't the brand she bought, and she called a family meeting. A meeting. For cheese. She talked about how it was beneath our family standards, below our family standards, for grocery store cheese. She laughed, telling it, and I watched her shoulders relax more than I'd ever seen them. "Your parents are kind of intense," I said carefully. She shook her head. "They're insane," she corrected. "They want me to be perfect because they can't be. My dad works 60 hours a week to prove something to his family. My mom got her whole face done because her mother never thought she was beautiful, and now they want me to be the opposite of them, to be excellent at everything they failed at. But their excellence is insatiable. It's never, ever enough. I listened to that and felt something break inside my chest. Quinn was talking about pain so deep she'd learned to call it routine, to treat it like normal, to schedule it on a magnetic board. So I did what any sensible person wouldn't do. I took her hand. Not romantically yet. Just to comfort her. To say we had time. Amanhã você pula yoga, I said, then caught myself. I mean, tomorrow you're skipping yoga. We're going to do something else instead. She looked at me like I'd just suggested climbing a building. That would be strange, she said. Yeah, that's exactly why we're doing it, I replied. And that's where it really started. Not with kissing or romance or any of the things they write songs about. It started with permission. With someone saying, you're allowed to be strange. You're allowed to skip. You're allowed to want things that don't fit in your calendar. That's when she started to fall. After that night, Quinn started looking for me. Not in a desperate way. In a way that was somehow worse because it meant she'd developed a taste for it. For freedom. For me. It wasn't anymore. Maddie comes and teaches me liberation on weekends. It was, when are you coming back? Every single day. It was messages every morning and every evening. It was her talking about skipping work because she wanted to travel somewhere with me she'd never heard of. It was her sending me photos of outfits she'd bought. Nothing perfect, nothing runway ready, just a denim jacket with patches sewn haphazardly by hand, asking if I thought it was cool. I did think it was cool. But that wasn't the point anymore. The point was that I'd started to fall too, and I was supposed to be the one in control here. I was the hired help. I was the paid performer. Except somewhere between the motorcycle and the rain and the bad chocolate, that had stopped being true. I was genuinely, completely, terrifyingly in love with her. And it was getting impossibly hard to pretend that I wasn't. We started holding hands. And then after a while, nobody even bothered pretending it was just for appearances or to keep up the charade. She came to my apartment, which was genuinely shit, by the way, a room shared with someone else's belongings, and we'd lie in bed talking about everything. Pasts that hurt, fears that nobody ever asked about, dreams that Quinn had buried somewhere so deep she didn't even know they existed. I wanted to be a photographer, as she confessed one night, staring at the ceiling of my small bedroom. When I was a kid, I wanted to go around taking photos of people, real people, their actual stories, moments nobody else would remember. But my dad said it was imprecise, that photography wasn't a quantifiable career, that it didn't have measurable returns. So it became a hobby that died quick because we don't encourage hobbies that don't have financial returns. We don't encourage anything that can't be counted. I listened to her tell stories like that, one after another, and each one was a small genocide of who Quinn could have been. Her parents had assassinated her freedom and buried it in the garden of perfection. So when she looked at me with those eyes that had learned to apologize for wanting things, I made a decision. So, let's go, I said. Let's take photos. She laughed. I don't have a camera, Maddie. Borrow one, steal one, invent one. That's absurd. Exactly. That's why we're doing it. And we did. Quinn borrowed an old camera from an aunt, started photographing. Flowers and beetles, people on the street, the way light enters an empty room and does something to the dust. The photos weren't technically good. The focus was sometimes off. The composition was instinctive rather than learned. But they were genuine. They were Quinn seeing the world as Quinn, not as Quinn's parents wanted her to see it. After the third time we went out to photograph, she kissed me. It wasn't planned. There was no perfect moment or sunset. It was on a street corner, next to a rotting storefront, while she was laughing at a pigeon that had actually stolen her pizza slice. She just turned to me and let it happen. And I realized that for someone who'd spent 26 years planning every single second, that was revolutionary. That was her declaring war on the people who built her cage. Was any of this real? She asked after, while we were still standing there, still breathing in each other's space. Or was it all just the job? And I understood then that she was asking the only question that mattered, that she was asking if I'd chosen her, or if I was still performing, that she needed to know if this was real. Quinn started skipping commitments. First, it was the yoga class, the one she'd told me she hated, the one she'd been attending religiously for years. Her parents didn't even seem to notice, and I wondered if they'd ever really paid attention to her schedule at all, or if it was just another thing she did to maintain the illusion of perfection. Then it was brunch with the pre-approved friends. Quinn texted them a message saying she had an emergency, something family-related. Nobody questioned it. Nobody seemed to care particularly where she was or what she was doing, and that made me angrier than it should have. Then she started missing work meetings. Nothing important. But Quinn was beginning to say no to things. And saying no, for someone who'd spent her entire life saying yes to everything, is like refusing to breathe. It's terrifying. It's also exhilarating. Her parents started noticing. Quinn's mom would call, and her voice had that acidic quality that comes from someone who's realized they're no longer completely in control. "You seem different," her mother said. "I'm fine," Quinn would respond. And she was. She was genuinely fine. Better than fine. "Different in a bad way," her mom insisted. We were at my apartment when her dad called. He wanted Quinn back in the socialization program, back on track, back to being the perfect daughter they'd purchased. Quinn went very pale when she got off the phone. "How much?" she asked me. "How much what?" I said, though I already knew. I already understood that the moment had arrived. The moment I'd been dreading since I kissed her the first time. "How much did your parents pay for me, Maddie?" In that moment, everything I'd avoided confronting for weeks came knocking on the door. And I had two options. Lie again, keep the performance going, or tell her the truth and watch her understand that it had all started with a transaction. $5,000 a month, I said. Her face went through a series of expressions too fast to track. For what? To socialize me? For. I paused. I should have lied. I should have softened it. But I was tired of lying. For pretending to be your girlfriend. She got out of bed like she'd been physically shocked. Like everything we had, the motorcycles, the rain, the photos, the kisses, had just been retroactively classified as work, as performance, as part of a contract she'd never signed. "How much?" she asked again, her voice different now, smaller, like she was testing if the word would hurt less the second time. 5,000. For how long? 3 months, 2 months left now. And then, you take off the mask, go back to your life, take the new car and disappear from mine? I wanted to say yes, I chose you, I stayed. I tore up the contract. But none of that was true yet. "No," I said. "Quinn, this was one thing before. This is another thing now." But she was already getting dressed, already preparing to leave, already understanding that there's a difference between being chosen and being paid to stay. 3 days without hearing from Quinn. 3 days is exactly how long it takes to understand you might have actually lost something really important. 3 days is when you stop waiting for a message and start accepting that maybe you never will. I tried texting her on the second day. Nothing. Third day? I called. Went straight to voicemail that wasn't even responding anymore. The silence was so complete it felt like violence. Then I got a call from her father. His voice was controlled, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been angry. "Quinn told us about the contract," he said. The kind of person who's furious but using that professional tone that hurts more than screaming ever could. She's very upset. She feels betrayed. I tried to explain. I'm sorry. You were hired to socialize her. You were paid to be her friend. That's all that happened. You don't know my daughter. You have no right to know her. Mr. Chen, what happened between us? Nothing happened. You did your job. Excellently. Actually, she's so free that she's having an existential crisis. Congratulations. And he hung up before I could respond. I sat in my apartment holding a phone that was no longer ringing, understanding that I'd just been fired from the job I'd already abandoned. I spent the rest of the day understanding what had happened. Quinn had gone home, told her parents what we were doing, and her parents, who'd always had absolute control over their daughter, decided I was the problem, that I'd corrupted their 3-month investment in sophisticated socialization. Then her mother called, with a different message, softer, which made it worse. She's confused, her mom said, and there was a kind of almost compassion in her voice, the kind that hurts because it comes from someone genuinely trying to control their daughter's pain. You offered her something that looked like freedom, but it's just chaos. When she goes to college, when she's alone for real, she'll realize she needs structure. She needs people to help her be better, not worse. Is she worse? I asked. She's confused, and confusion is worse than anything else, her mother said, and hung up. After that call, I understood their strategy completely. They weren't going to attack me directly. They were going to work on Quinn's head, making her question everything. If I really loved her, if I really wanted what was best for her, if freedom was the same thing as destruction. And the worst part? It was working, because Quinn was alone, processing everything, with no one to talk to, but people who had every reason to tell her I was a bad idea. A week passed. I was eating cold pizza in my apartment when I got a message. Not from Quinn, from someone named Priya, her friend. Hi, I'm Priya, Quinn's friend. She asked me to give you a message. She says she doesn't want to see you again, that what you had was nice while it lasted, but she needs to focus on other things now, that she wants to live freely, but freely away from you. That broke me in a way that money couldn't fix, because Quinn was right to doubt. And because even being right to doubt, I could still be true about how I loved her, about how that was completely real, about how she deserved to choose chaos if that's what she wanted. I put my phone down and didn't touch it for 2 days. The first days are the worst, because you're too busy hating yourself to feel anything else. The second days are worse, because you start coming out of the hatred and enter actual grief. And grief, my love, is when you understand that it was real. Completely, undeniably real. And now it's over. I went to work. I worked at a bar 3 nights a week, making drinks for tourists who never remember your name and locals who drink the same thing every time. It was the perfect job for someone who's broken because nobody expects you to be happy there. They want you to be functional. They want you to make their drink right. Fine. I functioned. 2 weeks later, Quinn walked into the bar. It wasn't planned. Or maybe it was. I don't know. But she was there, sitting in a corner, alone, wearing a denim jacket I'd never seen before. And that detail hurt, because I knew every piece of clothing she owned, every color and fit and style, and this was new. I pretended I didn't see her. I think it was obviously pretended, because she sent a message with the bartender. Can you bring that stupid drink you used to offer? That stupid drink was the bad watermelon juice that she'd learned to love. I made it carefully, with more attention than I'd given anything in weeks, and brought it to her table personally. Hi, she said, and her voice sounded different. Softer. Scarred. Hi, I answered. Your parents disappeared, she continued. They went to Paris for 2 months. relief from all the stress they had to manage. Actually, I think they ran from me, because I literally wouldn't stop questioning everything they taught me. "How do you mean?" I asked, sitting down across from her even though I shouldn't have. "Like, he said something about how I should focus on college, not distractions. Obvious reference to you, obviously. And I just exploded. Said I never chose what college I'm going to. Never chose a profession. Was literally living a life other people planned, and he was asking me not to consider the only people who'd ever given me choice." She breathed deeply, her hands wrapped around the watermelon juice like it was the only real thing in the world. Got ugly fast. Mom cried. Dad threatened to cut my allowance. We left Paris because he couldn't manage his own anger. I listened to all of that and felt relief mixed with guilt. She was thinking about me, but I'd caused this upheaval, this pain. "Quinn, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I know you were paid to start," she said quietly, taking my hand across the bar. "But that doesn't mean everything was a lie." I understood then what she was saying. "It means you stayed after it was finished. You kissed when you could have left. You chose me when my parents offered more money to disappear. More money. They literally said they'd pay you more to leave me alone." "What?" "Yeah. They contacted me with an offer. Said if I could prove you were manipulating me, they'd pay extra. They wanted me to become evidence against you, and I said no." And standing there with her hand in mine, both of us reaching across a table in a bar where nobody knew us, and nobody cared what we were or weren't, I finally understood something true. Sometimes the best things are the ones you don't plan for, and sometimes the best love is the kind that chooses to stay when it's no longer obligated, when staying costs everything, when staying means admitting you were wrong about which one of us was caged. "So what now?" I asked her. "Now we figure it out," she said. "But this time without contracts. This time we both choose." And that was how it started again. Not from the beginning, but from a real place. Not from a deal, but from a choice. Quinn's first semester of college was the kind where you almost lose someone. Not because she loved someone else. At least I don't think so. But because growing is strange when you're watching from a distance. She'd send me photos of friends I didn't know. Stories from parties I wasn't at. Inside jokes that didn't translate across the phone line. Twice she considered breaking up. The kind of things she'd mention casually. Like she was thinking about changing her major or cutting her hair. "Maddie, I think it would be easier." "Why?" "Because I'm growing and you're there. And when you're not here, it's weird to love you because it's like you became an idea instead of a person." That hurt because it was true. We were becoming memories instead of present tense. But then in the 3rd month, when she was having a genuine crisis, because photography was harder than she expected, because she'd failed a technical class she cared about, because she was starting to see that maybe this wasn't what she wanted after all, she called me at 3 a.m. "I'm having an existential crisis," she said, and I could hear the crying underneath her words. "And the first thing I wanted to do was call you. Not for you to fix me. Just for you to be here while I fall apart." I got in her car. Yes, she'd bought a car with money she'd saved. A real choice she'd made. And drove 3 hours to her college. I showed up at her dorm smelling like highway and coffee and drove too fast. And just held her while she cried about photographs and pressure and the question of whether she was brave or just broken. I spent the night with her lying in that tiny hospital dorm bed, talking about how everything had gone wrong, how maybe she'd made a mistake choosing photography, how maybe her parents were right that she wasn't enough to do anything alone. And I did what Maddie does when someone she loves is falling apart. I made her go outside, made her walk with me for hours through the campus at night, made her take photographs of boring places to see if she could make them interesting, made her remember that she could create beauty from nothing. She could. She took photographs so beautiful that a professor asked to use them in an exhibition. Asked. Didn't demand or grade or criticize. Asked. When I was leaving, Quinn kissed me the way she kissed now, with more knowledge, less urgency, more wisdom. The kind of kiss that comes after you discover you can kiss in many different speeds, and they're all real. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'll always come," I promised. "Even if I quit photography. Even if I change careers 3 times. Even if I go back to my parents' house admitting I was wrong. Especially then. Because then you need to know it's safe to change your mind. It's safe to be wrong. It's safe to become someone different." She smiled. That smile that's only hers, that nobody taught her, that only comes out when she's not afraid of being judged. Then I drove back to the city and went back to my bar. Back to my small, inadequate life that suddenly became more than enough because Quinn had chosen to come back to it. She chose me across distance. She chose me even though it was hard. She chose me when she could have made a cleaner choice. That meant everything. One day before Quinn left for college for real, we did something we'd never planned. We visited the place where it all started, the Lookout, where she got off a motorcycle shaking, where she learned that fear and freedom were closer cousins than she'd thought. The entire city spread out below us, everything smaller from up here, simpler, more comprehensible. "You were so scared that day," I said, remembering how her hands shook getting off the bike. "I was," Quinn admitted. "Of the motorcycle, of you, of myself, of what it meant that I wanted to do something my parents would hate." "And now?" I asked. Quinn blinked slowly, deliberately, like she was letting the question live in her body before answering. "Now, I'm scared you won't be with me in college. But it's like a fear I chose, you know? Like, I decided to move away to study and grow, and there's pain in that. But it's pain I can carry because I chose it, not because someone else scheduled it." "So we're ending before we even start?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No. I'm saying I understand now. You did your job. You taught me to fall. Now I have to learn to fly alone. But flying solo doesn't mean flying without a net. It means knowing someone's there if I need to land." That hit me in the chest. The kind of squeeze you feel when someone you love is growing away from you and you're proud of them for it anyway. "So we break up?" "No. We pause. Like, you're here pulling drinks, I'm going to college. We're in different places. But you know you can come back to me when you need to. That I'll be here, being chaotic in the same bar, the same way." "Yes, I know. And that's what matters. It's not about having someone every second. It's about being sure that when you come back, they're there. The way you left them. Bigger, but still there." She climbed off the bench and stood watching the city below. The kind of posture that had changed since the day she got off the motorcycle. Less rigid now, more her. "I'm going to make good photographs," she said, and her voice had certainty in it. "I'm going to graduate. I'm going to have friends I chose, not approved friends. I'm going to eat bad food and dance at weird parties and make choices my parents will think are terrible. I'm going to be chaotic my own way, which is different from yours but equally beautiful." "I already knew that," I said. "Yeah. But I needed to say it so you'd know. That you'll let me do it. That you won't try to keep me small. I will. Let you do it. Even if it hurts. Especially because it hurts. Because nothing worth doing is painless." We stood there a while longer, in silence, letting the city make its own choices down below. And I realized that love isn't always about staying physically present. Sometimes love is about letting someone leave, knowing they'll come back, different, better, more themselves than before. And knowing that when they do, you'll still be there, waiting with the same chaos, the same devotion, the same understanding that freedom is the greatest gift you can give someone you actually love. Quinn finished college, but not in a straight line. Nothing about her journey was linear, and I think that's what I loved most about it. She took a gap year in the middle because photography was hurting more than helping, because the pressure was too much, because she needed to remember why she'd wanted it in the first place. She came back, changed her focus 3 times, failed semesters, had crisis calls at 4 a.m. where she told me she was a failure, and I had to drive again to be with her. That's what made loving Quinn different. It wasn't a movie romance where after you kiss everything becomes magic and light and sunset scenes. It was work. It was her learning to fly. It was her falling. It was me catching her. It was her standing up and doing it again. But despite everything, despite all the detours and false starts and moments of genuine doubt, when she finally graduated, with a degree in photography and a portfolio that made people cry, it all made sense. Because she'd gotten there her own way. Not the way nobody expected. Not the way her parents would have chosen. She'd chosen messy. She'd chosen real. "You still want me to move in with you?" she asked one night, getting close to graduation. She was scared asking, I could tell. Scared that maybe I'd gotten tired of waiting. Scared that maybe I'd found someone easier in the time we'd spent apart. "Want to?" "I dream about it every day," I told her, and meant it absolutely. Even with everything that went wrong, even with the crises, the fears, the times I practically broke up with you. Especially those moments. Because you were finding yourself and I got to watch it happen. That's better than a love story. That's a real thing. And that's how Quinn moved in with me. In a chaotic way, without a planned date or moving trucks or timelines. Just one day she said, "I'm here now," and started bringing her things. Her camera equipment, her photography books, her weird art supplies, her pink couch that she'd stolen from her parents' house one night because it reminded her of a time she was beginning to explore color. She got a job at a photography studio. Nothing monumental. Nothing that impressed her parents too much or justified all their investment in her proper education. Just work that paid bills and let her sleep well at night, knowing she'd created something real that day. Her parents had stopped saying everything was a mistake. They hadn't become happy, exactly, but they'd stopped sabotaging. They'd come to understand that Quinn was gone from their cage, and trying to build new bars just made them look worse. That's enough with some people. I was still at the same bar, still pulling drinks, still being bad at important things, and good at things that didn't matter. Still being Maddie. Except now, Maddie had somewhere to go home to. Someone waiting in that small apartment. Someone who chose to be there. That changed everything. 4 years later. Quinn had her degree, her job, her own work displayed in galleries I never thought she'd get into. I had my bar and the regulars who ordered the same drink every time, and the tourists who forgot me the second they left. We had our apartment, small. The kitchen barely fit 2 bodies. The couch was stolen. The art on the walls was all her photography. We weren't married. We weren't institutionalized. We were just 2 bodies that chose to stay close. One night, while Quinn was photographing and I was lying on the floor being too lazy to move, she asked me to pose. "I don't want to pose," I said, closing my eyes. "It's not a pose," she said. "It's just you. You lying, being lazy, being yourself." I didn't move. She photographed anyway. When she showed me the photo later, it was exactly who I was. Disorganized, comfortable, genuinely outside control, not performing, not trying, just me. And she had made it beautiful. The kind of beauty nobody teaches you to value, the kind nobody would pay money to see, the kind that matters more than all the perfect photographs in the world because it was real. That night, when Quinn was sleeping, head on my neck, the way she'd learned to sleep years ago, I thought about how everything started with a contract, how it started with a lie. how it started because she was trapped and I was desperate. But how did it end? With freedom. With choice. With that kind of love that isn't necessary, but is genuinely, deeply desired. Because at the end, all anyone really wants is to be loved exactly as they are, without structure, without planning, without someone trying to schedule their authenticity. Just us, just the chaos that we chose together, just this being enough. And it was. It was absolutely enough. She stirred slightly in her sleep, her hand finding mine in the dark. And I realized something I should have known from the beginning. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being chosen. It's about someone looking at the real you. All the broken parts, the contradictions, the mess, the parts you wanted to hide, and deciding that's exactly who they want next to them. Quinn had chosen me. I had chosen her. And every day after that, we kept choosing. We kept waking up and choosing to stay. That's what it means to be free together. Not to escape, but to stay. Not because you have to, but because you can't imagine being anywhere else. Not because it's easy, but because she's worth it. And that's the only love story that matters. The one where you choose, every single day, to come back. And if Maddie and Quinn's story already has you hooked, wait until you see everything waiting for you on my Patreon. There you'll find exclusive stories, longer chapters, bonus scenes, and all those details that make these romances so much richer. The link is right below in the description.